Hello, my name is Corey and I would like to welcome you back to the Clater House. Today I want to talk about something that I really struggled with when I first started designing, and that is color. I had a really hard time setting directions for my designs, developing concepts. I would hit my head against the wall because I could not set myself up for success. I didn't understand color theory and I didn't know really how to create a color palette without just like pulling colors in that I liked. I didn't really know what worked together and what didn't. But once we got to the color palette and color theory unit of my design program, I had a huge aha moment and was from then on out more easily able to develop a strong starting point, create a good concept, and just stronger designs in general. Color is so important. It's one of the elements of design, so it's really important to consider when you are planning a design concept, and it should be one of the very first things that you consider. Also, knowing how to put together a color palette and understanding color theory can really help you save a little bit of money by helping you to understand how maybe you can incorporate some items that are less desirable, like architectural details or a piece of furniture that you don't have the money to replace. If you understand color theory, you might be able to incorporate some of those unchangeable items into your design in a way that you're happy with. So today I'm going to walk you through the basics of color theory and how to develop a color palette when putting together your design concept. Let's first dive in to color theory. Color theory is basically the science and art of color. It explains how colors interact with one another and how they can be used to create beautiful, aesthetically pleasing spaces. Looking at the color wheel, we have 3 different categories of color, and these are primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. They are the colors that every other color on the color wheel derive from. We then have our secondary colors, which are orange, green, and purple. Secondary colors are made by mixing 2 primary colors. And then in between our primary and secondary colors, we have tertiary colors. So these are red-orange, yellow-orange, yellow-green, blue-green, blue-violet, and red-violet. And as their names suggest, they are created by mixing a primary and a secondary color. Now, looking at our wheel of color, let's talk about some elements of color. Our elements are hue, which is basically the color itself. It's another word for color, like the hue of my denim is blue, or the color of my denim is blue. Hue and color, the hue is the color. Next, we have a color's value or its brightness. It's how light or dark a color is, or how much white or black is added. This is where we get our shades and our tints. A shade is how much black is added. A tint is how much white is added. Another element of color is our chroma, or our brilliance. This is how strong or dull a color is. It's just basically the saturation of the color, or how much gray is added. And this is known as a tone. I think a really big proponent to the way color can affect the mood and feeling of a space is through tone. Just like someone's tone of voice can allude to what mood they may be in, a color tone used in your space can help communicate the mood and the vibe of your room. In addition to these elements of color, we also have color temperature, and this is rated on a scale of warm and cool colors. And then we have our neutrals, which I'll get to. Our warm colors are anything that fall between red and yellow. These colors are really warm and inviting and cozy, and they give you a sense of being welcomed and held. However, if the elements of color, our tint, shade, tone, the value, and the chroma, if those elements aren't considered, the warm colors can end up feeling really energizing and overwhelming. They can be really stimulating, and they can make a space feel smaller. That envelopment of a warm color can turn into a cage, sort of. It kind of feels like it's closing in on you in a very overwhelming, stimulating kind of way. Our cool colors are anything that falls between green and violet or purple. These colors are really good at achieving a calming, serene effect, kind of like a spa feeling, whereas warm colors are more of like cabin in the woods, calm, cozy. Cool colors are more of like that spa, retreat, clean, fresh, calm feeling. However, again, if we don't carefully consider our elements of color, cool colors can end up feeling stark and sterile and off-putting. Warm colors create a sense of enclosement, whereas cool colors create a sense of spaciousness. So not considering the elements, that can turn into, it feels desolate. It feels like there is no structure around you and it just feels very uninviting and stark and sterile, like a hospital. There's no energy. The energy has been drained. In addition to our cool and warm colors, we also have neutrals. Neutrals are great at providing a backdrop and complementing to create balance with our cool and warm colors. They can help create contrast and dynamics within a space, or just make a background kind of fade away so that the colors that you're using can stand out and be highlighted. These neutrals are your beiges and whites and blacks and grays. So the colors that give us our elements, our value, and our brilliance, white, black, and gray, those are our neutrals, and they help to highlight and balance our other colors. Now you'll notice on the color wheel, I left out yellow green and blue violet, and these are colors created by mixing a cool and a warm color. These two tertiary colors, there's some debate on whether they're warm or cool. I don't pay too much attention to it. If it works in a color palette, great. And you know, if you're using blue violet, violet, and red violet, it's probably gonna lean more cool because you have two other cool colors. Whereas if you're using yellow orange, yellow, and yellow green, that's probably gonna feel more warm because you have two warm colors. So I think those are kind of just like, they can sway either way. That's gonna be up to you whether you're using them as a cool or a warm color. Then getting into creating a palette with these colors, it's important to understand color harmony groups. Now, there's lots of color harmony groups, but I think there's three that are the easiest to wrap your head around and probably that you see more often than some of the others. And these are complementary color harmony. So this is two colors that sit opposite each other on the color wheel. Example, purple and yellow. They sit directly opposite and they complement one another. Complementing colors do a great job at creating dynamic designs. They're on two opposite sides, so although they balance one another, they also create a dynamic contrasting effect that's really good at providing some energy into a space. You see this really effectively used in logo design. Think about the Denver Broncos and the Miami Dolphins. They use orange and blue in their logos, and these create really interesting, dynamic, memorable logos. If you tell me Denver Broncos, I am not picturing any of the players, I am picturing their logo. That's what I go to. Similarly, LA Lakers, theirs are the example we gave, purple and yellow. Same thing. Although they are using a different complementary colors, it's still the same effect. They're still memorable and dynamic and engaging. Again, complementary colors are just two colors that sit opposite on the color wheel. Next, we have analogous colors. These are three colors that sit next to each other on the color wheel. Example, red, red-orange, and orange. Because there's not as much differentiation between these colors, there's not as much dynamism, so they have a little bit more of a calming feel. Think of like a sunset. The colors kind of all blend together. None of them like stick out more than another. Same thing in your space. These colors kind of, you can move through the space and see all of these colors without it being too eye-catching. Your eye doesn't land on any one thing in particular. Your eye moves across because the colors aren't fighting one another. Again, this is an analogous palette, and these are three colors that sit right next to each other on the color wheel. The third one I'm going to talk about is the triadic color harmony group. As its name suggests, this is 3 colors, and they're 3 colors that sit equidistant around the color wheel. They make a triangle on the color wheel. An example would be our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. They sit equidistant from one another on the color wheel. They each have 3 other colors that fall in between them, and the effect that this gives is, while still dynamic and energizing, it feels a little bit more balanced than just 2 complementary colors. There's more colors to look at than just 2. However, the colors balance each other nicely. Rather than be overwhelmed by the contrast of 2 colors, you have 3 colors that you're considering, so it feels a little bit more balanced while still maintaining energy and contrast throughout the room. Again, this color harmony group is triadic, and it is 3 colors that sit equidistant from each other on the color wheel. Now that we understand the basics of color theory and our color harmony groups, let's talk about how to use that knowledge to create a color palette. As with anything in design, I would start with your function of your room. Rather than look at the aesthetics, look at the function. You'll want to consider the effects of the colors that you're using as well as the color harmony. We talked about the effects of warm and cool colors as well as some of the effects of some of our color harmony groups. Let's look at the example of like a workout space. Are you someone who likes to do more meditation, yoga, slow, calming breath work type workouts, or do you want really high energy cardio, weightlifting, like to be motivated and like hit your workouts hard? If you want a calming, meditative space, you might want to look at an analogous color palette with cooler colors to create a serene, balanced, tranquil space that's going to allow your mind to be calm and facilitate slow, mindful movement. Whereas if you want to like go heavy on the cardio and the weightlifting and you really want to hit your workout hard, maybe you want to create a more energizing space. Use complementing colors like red and green. You have the warmth of the red, maybe emphasize that. Use red more than you use green in the room to get the energizing effect of that red color, while also using green to complement the red and add more of a dynamic, contrasting, energizing feeling to that space. So looking at the function can help steer you in the direction of what to consider when you're trying to develop the mood or the feeling of the space. It gives you a good starting point for developing your palette. I would then find some inspiration and maybe try to pull a color palette from your inspiration. If you have a bedroom and the window looks out into your backyard and you enjoy walking through your backyard, that is a calming, inviting, welcoming feeling that you get in your backyard that's right outside your bedroom, and you want a relaxing bedroom, maybe look at what's out in your yard. Maybe you have a maple tree or some coleus or some other types of shrubs or bushes that have a really nice, deep, rich red color to them. And maybe where you live in the Pacific Northwest and the sky above you is often a little bit stormy and a little bit moodier, so the blue color from the sky is a little bit deeper. Maybe you have some yellow daisies that grow in your yard sprinkled throughout the red. So right there, you have your primary colors, maybe not at their most fully saturated, brilliant color. Maybe there's some deeper tones of those colors, some different shades and tints of those. And then in addition, in your yard, I'm sure you have some mulch or the bark of a tree or some stone pavers from your landscaping. Like you have some grays and some browns and black and white in your yard, and you can look at how those are incorporated in your yard. Bring some of those in. Maybe your floors are a deep cherry colored stained oak flooring, and you know it would be really expensive to refinish your flooring or replace your flooring. So there's your red color that was on your bushes and your maple tree. Right there is some of that. Maybe you find a Persian or vintage inspired rug that has some more blues and grays in it to sit on top of that. you go for maybe some more of, not like bright yellow bedding, but maybe you go for some cream bedding and off-white with a yellow undertone to bring that in. Like, just considering something you pull inspiration from, whether it's your backyard or not, or maybe you find a piece of artwork and you want that artwork to steer the direction of your design, looking at the colors in that and using your knowledge of color theory and color harmony to pull colors out of that to, one, make your painting work in the room, but also to give you a good starting point for that palette. Now, an example in my own home of how I had to do this, as you can see behind me, in my fireplace, I have this travertine surround around my fireplace. While travertine kind of comes in and out of style, I think most people really associate it with like the 90s, early 2000s, Tuscan tiled countertop kitchens, like that whole thing. I think travertine in general, right now at least, feels a little bit more dated. I don't have the budget to rip this out and replace it with beautiful Carrara marble or like a really expensive soapstone. So what I do have is $30 to go buy a small can of paint to paint the surround. So although this side of the fireplace is white, the other side, it's a double-sided fireplace, I picked a brown color with undertones that complemented the undertone in the travertine. So this travertine, I don't know if you can see real well on camera, but it has a very yellowy undertone to it, and it has some like, not yellow patches, but just the undertones of it are more yellow. So using my knowledge of color theory, although the travertine is beige and I picked a brown paint color, the undertone of the travertine being yellow, I picked a brown paint that has a little bit more of a purple undertone. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a purple color, it just, the undertones of the brown paint are purple, while the undertones of the beige travertine are yellow. So the brown and beige go well together and the undertones complement one another. So there's a little bit of energy in the way that they work together. I saved some money by incorporating the travertine, and using that as my starting point, I can look at the rest of the room and find other ways to make the whole composition of the fireplace mantle combined with the travertine work in the space. Now, using your color palette to help with your design concept, this is where I would create your mood board. I'm not going to dive into that today, but I think kind of doing these in tandem, looking for some inspiration, maybe pulling some colors from those, developing a color palette, and then going and finding more inspiration based off that color palette, I think is a useful way to start off your design concept. So I always like to, when I make my mood boards, incorporate my color palette on my mood board. So that's going to be it for today's video, just the basics of color theory, looking at the color wheel, elements of color, our color harmony groups, and how to use those to develop and create a color palette to start your design concept. I hope you found this video helpful. I know when this information was presented to me, it made a big difference and really helped me a lot. So I hope it does the same for you. If you have any additional questions about the topics I covered in this video, or there's any other design topics you're curious about, please leave me a comment below. If you did find this one helpful, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more DIY and design related content. I will be back next Friday with another video for you, and until then, I'm wishing you all my best.